All right, 7.6 language. The objective for today is students will be able to explain how language is formed and evaluate what characteristics language has by analyzing Hackett's 13 language universals. So first, language can be broken up into different components. One is phonemes, and these are basic sounds of language. Two are morphemes, and this is prefixes and suffixes, or the smallest unit of meaning in language. Grammar is an overall set of rules. Within grammar, there are two specific rules that we focus on. The first is semantics, and this is where we have rules about how things mean, or if you wrote something that might change the meaning of a source. And the second is, syntax, and that's rules for the order of words. That's actually what word can go in front of another word. Language development, when do we learn what we learn? So on average, this is what you will notice. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always correct, but just on average. Explaining language development. The first one we look to is Skinner. Skinner did operant learning, which talks about punishment and reward systems, and we'll talk about that when we get to the learning chapter. Some learning principles are association, limitation, and reinforcement. Association is the more sights and sounds you compare with language, the better you are to remember it. Limitations means that you're only listening to one person or very few people, and so that can make it hard to learn language. And reinforcement is going to be a smile, no matter what language you speak. Then we're going to move on to Chomsky, and Chomsky believed that we had an inborn universal grammar. And he said that we had language acquisition, or we learn language, because of a device that we have inside of us in our brains, and that we are automatically pre-wired to speak the language that we speak. He also believed in universal grammar and to start speaking with nouns. Statistical learning and critical periods. What we found is that 7-year-olds are able to understand the syllables. That's about it. Very simple. And then critical or sensitive period for every child when learning language is before age 7. You're more likely to learn a language and remember it if you learn it before age 7. All right, language and the brain. The first is aphasia, and this is when you have impairment of language that is usually caused by brain damage. But there's two areas that you can potentially damage. The first is the Broca's area, and this is the area of the brain that is responsible for language expression. So when you don't sound flat or you do sound flat. And Wernicke's area is the area of brain that is responsible for language reception. So processing that information. And then Wernicke's area is the area of brain that is responsible for language reception. All right, moving on to thinking in images. Implicit memories. Implicit memories, remember, are things that you can do automatically. They're skills that you do. And so these are easy to test in a brain image scan because we can ask somebody to do a specific skill, and as they do it, we can scan their brains. So when we ask people to imagine an activity that they can do, they can scan the brain and find out that the brain actually lights up as if you were doing that activity, even if you weren't actually doing it, even if you're just thinking of doing it, that part of your brain still fires, which is pretty cool. We've also discovered that language can influence thinking. So the first is Whorf's linguistic determinism, and what Whorf believes, and this is questioned, this is not something that everybody agrees with, is that language can determine the way that we think. So if you think, especially if you're bilingual and you think in a specific language, sometimes that alters or can influence the way you think about something. Again, this is debated, but it's something that you're going to need to be aware exists. The second way that language influences thinking is the bilingual advantage. So what they found is that if you learn your language before the critical period, before 7, and you become a fluent speaker, that you will overall have better language development if you speak more than one language. Now, again, you have to learn the language by the critical period. So if you learn a second language after that critical period, the bilingual advantage doesn't necessarily impact you per se. I mean, it's still obviously amazing to learn more than one language, but that learning 2 languages or being bilingual before the critical period can give you better language development. And that's it for today. Thanks.